For this evening to discuss the state of Texas women, which unfortunately is not great at the moment. In the last week alone, the Texas Medical Board opened up public comment for testimonials on exceptions for abortion care, and the Texas Supreme Court ruled against Kate Cox's request for medically necessary abortion upon receiving a fatal fetal diagnosis. And on Tuesday, the federal government defended the safe and effective abortion pill, mifepristone, before the Supreme Court. And just last night, a video leaked of extremist group Abolish Abortion Texas, their plan to apply the death penalty for women who seek abortions or to use IVF, including pregnant minors. Reproductive freedom, among a million other issues facing Texas women today, are on the ballot this November. And we're here with the women that will work to restore those freedoms this evening. So I would like to introduce the Honorable Marissa Perez-Diaz, Judge Christine Weems, Kristen Carranza, and Avery Bishop. So let's go ahead and jump right in. To Member Perez-Diaz, you made history as the youngest Latina elected to serve on a state board of education in the country. What inspired your decision to run again during this pivotal moment for ensuring equitable representation in public classrooms?
Oh, thank you so much for that question, Brian. I want to say thank you so much for standing up this incredible panel and really, I think, just lifting up the issues that are facing women every day. Especially here in Texas, we have a lot to overcome. What you just shared prior to the introduction is terrifying, and we know that it's, if you truly believe in life, if you're pro-life, you wouldn't be pro these policies because that's not pro-women and pro women's life. It's heartbreaking. So yeah, we, serving in the Texas State Board of Education as a minority on the board in terms of politics, it's a 5-10 split. And so my tenure on this board has always been a balance of, what are we willing to compromise? What are we willing to negotiate? And what is a non-negotiable for us, right? And so I've done my very best to make sure that I work across the aisle to ensure that whatever decisions we're making at the State Board of Education, we're always centering students, right, our young people, and then the adults in the system that are helping to support them through their educational journey. So I've loved what I've done for the last decade, but I will say this last election cycle was probably the most harmful that I've experienced during my tenure on the board, because we saw the election of a person who is an insurrectionist. She was in DC on January 6th. She proudly posted about it on Facebook, and then was kicked off of her local school board only to be elected onto the State Board of Education. So that was quite terrifying, not really understanding what the purpose was for the run, other than to get into a bigger seat of power. So I think that was for me one of the most alarming things, as I look to see, what my steps were, right? And I, like I said, I absolutely love what I do. Education policy is near and dear to my heart, and that's been my work for the last decade. But recognizing that we had an individual like that step onto the board, and then a couple of other individuals who aren't necessarily student-centric, right, or even public education-centric, they're agenda-driven more than anything else, really pushed me to absolutely, right, validate the idea that I wanted to run again. I need to serve, right? I want to be a voice for the people who, who don't have a voice at many tables, right? For the little Marisas around the state of Texas who just want a brighter future, right? Who want opportunity and access in spaces that they're not always privy to, right? And so making sure that I remain a path, right, and remain a voice or create space for individuals is what is at the core of why I decided to run again, and I'll continue to do so. It's my heart and it's my passion, and I want to make sure that there's somebody up in Austin representing the State Board of Education for the right reasons.
Yeah, that's amazing reasons. Um, Kristen, you're running for State House because you've mentioned that your mother inspired you to become an advocate for working communities. Can you expand on how that led you to run for office?
Absolutely. And I'm so honored to be here and, to share my story of what led me to run for office for the first time. So, I grew up in the district that I'm running in House District 118. I grew up on the south side of San Antonio. My mom's a single mom. And growing up, my mom has chronic health issues. And when, I was younger, she didn't have health insurance. So it was really hard on our family. I got my very first job when I was 16 years old at Bill Miller's Barbecue. And if you're from San Antonio, that's like the most San Antonio thing ever. And I was working because I wanted to help my mom and my family with, medical bills and regular household bills. And, in my senior year of college, I got a call from my mom and she let me know that her health had gotten worse. And as a result, was going to have to move into a women's shelter because she lost her job. So I left school my senior year to help my mom, and I think any daughter would do that, and I made sure that I helped her get back on her feet. And that whole experience really inspired me to become a community organizer and work for candidates that support the dreams of working people. And throughout my career as an organizer, I've registered over 10,000 voters here in Texas. I've gotten to enroll families in the ACA, and I've gotten to work to elect women like Gina Ortiz-Jones, Wendy Davis, and Hillary Clinton. And I'm really excited about the work that I've been able to do. I really made the decision to step in front of the curtain because we need a seat at the table for working families like mine. Our current representation, John Lujan, he doesn't respect, women's choices over our own reproductive freedoms. He's someone who votes against teacher pay. He's voting against public school funding. And the south side of San Antonio and House District 118 deserves so much better. Texas is turning more and more blue every single election cycle. We're seeing the needle move every single year, and we're going to be blue. It's only a matter of time. And the first step is by flipping these House seats like House District 118. And that's why I'm so excited to be running in this presidential year, because I know that it's going to take a lot of work, but this is a seat that Democrats can definitely win. We just got to make sure that we're putting together the resources and the coalitions to do that. And that's what I'm working so hard to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Judge Weems, you are taking on the awesome task of running statewide to serve on the Texas Supreme Court. Ann Richards was the last Democratic woman to win a statewide election in Texas in over 30 years. Why is it so important for you to run in 2024?
Because it's about time that we change that, right? I mean, 30 years is a long time without any kind of Democratic representation statewide. I'll be honest, I didn't start off my career path saying I wanted to grow up and be a judge. I always wanted to be a trial lawyer. That was the most important thing. I wanted to fight for clients. I wanted to fight for people. I wanted to fight for businesses. I mean, that was literally what I wanted to do, was to go in the courtroom and fight the fight that people couldn't fight for themselves. I mean, that's why they hire lawyers. But in trying cases in courtrooms, you kind of come to the stark reality that when you elect judges, you don't always elect the most qualified people. It's just the reality of it. Most average voters don't know very much about the judges. Here in Harris County, where I am, there are at any given time 50 to 70 judicial races on any ballot. So it's a whole lot to ask of people to know who they're going to vote for. And the year I got elected was the last year they had straight ticket voting in 2018. So that's the year I took the bench. I ran not necessarily because it was a calling, so to speak, but for me, I am a big believer that if you see a problem in the world and you want to make change, then you have to try, right? Like if I see there's something that, if I want to say that something is wrong, I'm going to try to fix it. And so for me, that was like running for judge. I knew I was qualified. I'm double board certified. I'm a member of the American Board of Trial Advocates. It's an honorary organization for trial lawyers. I mean, I've got the bona fides as a trial attorney. And so I thought, well, I'm going to try to run for judge. And if I win, then I'll be a judge and I will try to change what I can. And if I don't win, I can complain the rest of my life about what a horrible system it is, because at least I tried to fix it, right? that's kind of how I look at taking the next step in running for the Supreme Court. I have been, I've seen, we've all seen what our Texas Supreme Court has done, and what they are continuing to do. I see it in the all the cases that we see in the news. I also see it in the cases that they take of mine that have been overturned, those kinds of things. And I see it when I think about my opponent that I'm running against. My opponent, John Devine, is specifically, and he's proud of it, very anti-abortion. He's been arrested 37 times outside of abortion clinics for trespassing, and he wants everybody to know it, and he's proud of it. He's anti-women's rights. He has a whole host of issues, judicial ethical issues. It's all it's very well documented in the news. I mean, I have to be careful because I can't criticize a person who literally is going to check my homework. I mean, my rulings do actually go all the way up to the Texas Supreme Court sometimes. But I mean, I can point out facts, and these are facts. These are facts that he is absolutely proud of. There needs to be a change. You can't go 30 years. That's actually most of my adult life without proper representation, because the entire state is not red. But our entire statewide judiciary, from the Texas Supreme Court to the Court of Criminal Appeals, has been red, all red, for decades. And I feel like now we have a really, really good opportunity to make that change, in large part because they are doing things that just making people angry. I mean, and not just us. I mean, people across the nation are looking at what the Texas Supreme Court does, looks at what our governor does, and they attribute it to Texas. Look at what Texas is doing now. And I always have to stand up and go, whoa, that's not my Texas, right? So be careful what you say. Texas is more than just a couple of people in Austin who are making the decisions that get all the publicity. Our Texas is diverse. Our Texas has many, many political affiliations, opinions, and it's time it is represented in a body like the Texas Supreme Court. That is why I am very, very excited about this opportunity. I feel like particularly my opponent is vulnerable. He was the only one with a primary opponent, and he only beat his primary opponent by 1%, 16,200 votes statewide. The door is slowly opening, and it is time for us to capitalize on it, get excited about it. Because I think for too long, people are like, we're never going to win. Why do we bother? Because if we don't keep trying, then that door is never going to swing open. We have to kick it open a little bit more every single time until it swings open fully. And you never know which kick is going to be the one where it absolutely makes change. And I'm optimistic that this is the year.
I love that so much. Yeah, we desperately need change to the Supreme Court of Texas. So I want to move on to Avery. Avery, you made history by becoming the first Asian American to be crowned as Miss Texas, and now you're running for office to represent your community in the State House. With such an interesting path to public service, what made you decide to run for office?
Three main reasons, but first, before I hop in, thanks so much for having me, and thanks for allowing me to be on an incredible panel with other women in government and politics. I am awestruck, but three main reasons why I decided to run for office. Number one, I'm the better candidate. For the district I'm running for, I looked at her voting record. I looked at the fact that she wasn't present, that she didn't attend events. I looked at the fact that she's avoidant of her constituents and cannot explain the decisions that she makes in Austin. That's the first reason. Number two, sick and tired of not seeing myself represented in Austin, similar to being represented physically outwardly as an AAPI, but also coming from a working family like Christiane's and mine as well. Both my parents worked two jobs each. My father currently still is a school bus driver. Oftentimes we see representatives at the Capitol and feel that they're so disconnected from some of the issues that we're experiencing here statewide. And then finally, the larger purpose as to why I'm running for office is to create a seat at the table for all of our generations. The average age of a voter is 65 and over, and yet the largest age eligible voter is 18 to 28. We have the most power to flip seats and to make change, and yet we are severely underrepresented. I'm running for office for those three main reasons, and hopefully we will flip the seat from red to blue in November. But I have so many incredible women to thank to encourage me to run for office. It's a really big challenge to make that decision, to make that commitment. And I've often heard that with women of color, it takes 7 more times to ask them to run for office because of how much more challenging it is for us specifically. So I'm just happy to be running for office, learning as I go, and sharing my knowledge with people and the things I discover along the way. One of the final reasons that I've decided to run is to increase transparency and visibility in politics. A lot of us distrust our representatives because we just don't understand the process. We don't understand the bills that are being presented, and for a reason. A lot of our representatives don't want us to know what they're voting on, the bills that they're proposing, and how they vote on those bills and legislation. As I run for office, I plan to be very transparent in the social media content that I make, breaking down hard to understand topics and concepts so people can understand those issues better and vote more educated come November.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's hard to convince women to run for office, even though we absolutely deserve to be there. Yeah. I'd like to move on to Board Member Perez Diaz. You've been a necessary voice on our state Board of Education, especially during the rise of the MAGA Republican attacks on our public education system. Can you tell us more about your efforts to make school curriculum more inclusionary?
Oh, absolutely. So I've been serving on the board now since 2013, and since my very first year on the board, one of the very first things that my colleague at the time, Ruben Cortez from the Rio Grande Valley, and I had a conversation about was what did we want to attack first, right? And as we looked at what was coming up for the State Board of Education, social studies was one of those things that we've constantly heard about from our constituency, right? We know what the Alamo is, we know about the Pilgrims and the Indians and all of those traditional stories that you hear in your history textbooks. But being from Texas and recognizing that the majority of the state was Mexico and was land for indigenous people, those stories are not told, they're not expressed. We don't see, Avery just talked about representation in politics. It starts in the schools. We know that our children are incredibly diverse in our public education system, the majority of which are also educated in that system, right? And so trying to make sure that when our students are learning, they're seeing themselves reflected in the curriculum, right? There's tons of research to support the fact that when students can resonate with the curriculum that's in front of them, they're going to invest that much more, right? They're going to be that much more successful. So it's been a passion of mine from the very beginning to really champion things like Mexican American studies, which took us almost 5 full years to approve in a state which at the time was 52% Latinos in public education, the majority of which identify as Mexican American, right? That's insane. But when we did that, we were able to create sort of the foundation for other ethnic studies courses to follow. So African American studies came very shortly thereafter. We were on this wonderful trajectory, and then I tell you, this last election cycle has been detrimental to the State Board of Education and the progress we've been making across the board, but specifically around inclusion and representation in our curriculum. On the path toward approval, we had an AINS course, so American Indian Native Studies course, and an Asian American Studies course, both of which are now being piloted. AINS, the first I mentioned, was supposed to go before the board in our last board meeting for first reading, so we were on the way to approval. And our chair unilaterally decided not to have it on the agenda. He can pull it, and had no other rationale than to talk about how he wasn't comfortable with the curriculum because he wasn't aware of it. And that's BS. Like it was there. And I've been trying to be very graceful working with him and giving him some sort of, some time to learn. But we're not seeing it on this agenda. And now I'm pissed, right? Now I'm like, you weren't being honest. And so now my grace is gone. We need to work toward that because again, full histories are real histories, right? And so we shouldn't be afraid to engage in those conversations. It establishes and encourages critical thinking. The other thing that I think is really important to note is, while there's a bunch of like the culture wars have always existed at the State Board of Education when it comes to representation and inclusion in curriculum. But with this wave of MAGA, I don't even know that the Republicans, it's just, they're crazy, right? With this wave of individuals who are very far right leaning and really don't understand what's actually happening in the schools, there's this national narrative that people are running with, like with organizations like Moms for Liberty, who, are making their rounds in local school boards. So they're not even hurting at the statewide level, they're hurting at the local level, right? And local school boards don't tend to be partisan. They've made that politicking partisan, and you see it damaging the progress that school districts are making. You're seeing books, right? Not textbooks, books being removed from libraries and identified as inappropriate and pornography, and all of that is just ridiculous. And it's because people that are out there running these, misinformed, intentionally or unintentionally narratives, right? They're stripping individuals of their right to read about themselves in books in schools. So, I continue to make it my business to be the champion for inclusion and representation in our curriculum because our students deserve it and their families deserve it, right? It's, it was a very harsh reality for me as a 32-year-old learning about my own history and didn't know half of what had happened here in Texas to Mexican Americans. And young people deserve to know that, right? Because when they learn that, they won't repeat it.
Yeah, that's very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to move on to Christian, Texas Republicans and the legislature are plotting to destroy the most important pillars of our communities, which are public schools. Their private school voucher scam would actually defund our classrooms and leave our teachers who are already so burdened stranded. Can you talk about your plans for defending public education?
Absolutely. I'm a product of public schools in San Antonio, and I wouldn't be the person that I am today if it weren't for the education and support that my family received from public schools as I was growing up. Private school vouchers drain taxpayer money from already underfunded schools. In Harlandale ISD, where I went to school, we had 4 elementary schools closed down just this past year. And, so this is a vulnerable community, right? Here in District 118. So this is a community this is a school district where 25% of families who have a student that they send to these schools falls under the poverty line. And so, when we talk about private school vouchers in this district, this is a debate that isn't just something that folks read about or see on TV. It's a lived reality. And I've knocked thousands of doors, and I'm still continuing to do so. And I hear it on the doors all the time. If someone is not a teacher, they're a mom of a teacher, a sister, a spouse of a teacher. So education is a really important issue. And that's why it's so important that we have representatives that are really going to stick up for our students and make sure that we're protecting teacher pay, right? Because for a lot of families, specifically in the district, we look at schools not just for education, but also safety nets. So as I was growing up, my mom was a working mom, and it was an after-school program at Vestal Elementary that allowed for me and my brother to just grow up safe and healthy. I don't know what we would have done if we didn't have that after-school program. And so these schools are so much more than I think we think of them. And it's so important for me that, we have leaders that are in the rooms when these decisions are getting made about these programs when it comes to our schools, because we know that these types of programs are the last to get funded and the first to get cut. So, my opponent, John Lujan, has been voting to defund public schools. Right now, teacher pay is being tied to the voucher vote. And it's really unconscionable. Increasing teacher pay should be a no-brainer. So that's definitely something that I have continued to advocate for, along with increasing our student funding for the basic allotment and ensuring that the basic allotment is tied to the cost of increase associated with inflation. Because this is not just an issue about education, right? It's also an issue in making sure that we are keeping up with the rising cost of living. So Greg Abbott is really accounting for this vote and for this seat, right? Like right now, he's working really hard to rework the math in his favor. So when he gets to put this on the floor again, he's going to get and try to pass the voucher vote, right? So that's why it's so hard that, we're doing everything that we can to flip this seat. And, because this is the most flippable seat in the state of Texas, right there with Avery Bishop's seat. So, it's really going to come down to really a few seats. And this is the number one issue in our district. That's why I'm fighting so hard to protect our teachers and students.
Yeah, I love that. Judge Weems, your opponent, Justice John Devine, notably sat on the bench that denied Kate Cox a life-saving abortion. It's clear that the MAGA Supreme Court of Texas is issuing decisions based on self-interest and hyperpartisanship. How do you plan to bring transparency back to the Supreme Court bench?
Well, I mean, so here's the hardest part about running for a judicial position, right? In the state of Texas, we are required to run as part of a party. But realistically speaking, we are not allowed to tell you any of our opinions, thoughts about anything that may potentially come before us. So, I mean, the trickiest thing was when I ran for the first time in 2018, and you go anywhere, what is the one thing everybody wants to know? What is your opinion on abortion? What is your opinion on gay rights? And all I can tell people is I'm a Democrat, or these are the individuals or organizations that have endorsed me. And the reason why this is so important is because, realistically speaking, we are not supposed to put our opinion out there about anything that may come before us, because for us, it is the appearance of impropriety. It's not whether or not there actually is a bias or something like that there. It's literally, does it look bad? Does it look bad that you are sitting there making a decision about something where you've already prejudged? And I think that's kind of the problem I have with someone like Justice John Devine, who has been absolutely vocal, who campaigns on his opinion about abortion and the fact he's been arrested so many times for protesting abortion clinics, is sitting there hearing a case about abortion. And make no mistake, abortion is an issue that comes before the civil judiciary. We hear it more often than you would imagine. And it doesn't always make news, but it is something that we hear a lot, which is why if we have those kind of really strong opinions and we put them out in the universe, we should be doing what is right, which is recusing ourselves, right? And that's not what is happening when it needs to happen. And I think that is kind of the problem. The Constitution guarantees the separation of church and state, and the lines are getting blurred every single day in Texas. It's getting blurred all across the nation. And the troubling part for me is, when we're talking about church, we're not talking about religion generally. We're talking about a specific religion, which is exclusionary to everybody else who practices any other religion or who chooses to practice no religion at all. That is why that separation needs to happen, because that is how you look out for everyone. And so that is not what we see necessarily in our statewide judiciary, in large part because they themselves put it out there, right? They kind of bring it upon themselves, and we are not being more vocal about how it looks, about the hypocrisy. I mean, ultimately, when you talk about bringing transparency to the Texas Supreme Court bench, I don't think enough people understand what the Supreme Court actually does. We are the last line of defense when it comes to the interpretation of laws, right? The legislature makes the laws, the executive branch, enforces the laws, and ultimately we interpret the laws to determine any law that our state legislature comes up with, whether or not it's constitutional or not, whether or not it is sufficient as written or not. That is the problematic part, right? I don't think enough people understand that about how important this race is. And a lot of people just kind of look at it as, oh, there's so many judges, it's a down ballot race, it doesn't matter. And because people just don't realize that by electing our judges, this is what happens. It kind of goes back to the point I made earlier. Many people vote and don't even think about who they're voting for or what it means or how it can impact them until we see issues like Kate Cox, right? Until you start seeing that the decisions that our Texas Supreme Court makes, it is coming to all of our doors. It is more real than you think. It's not just about big businesses fighting over money. It is every day becoming more and more personal to more and more Texans. And that is why it's very important who we have on that Texas Supreme Court to make sure that those people, they have values similar to the values of a majority of our population. I mean, I've heard many people say, and I think it's true, Texas is a blue state. We are just not enough of a voting blue state. And that's going to be the hard part in 2024 is getting everybody, all of those people who feel strongly about issues that are important to us, that they come out and make their voice heard because it does matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what you said about Texans needing someone who actually fights for the entire state for very popular legislation. I'm going to pass it over to Avery, and I'm going to ask, it's so inspiring to see you use your platform to elevate many issues facing Texans today, including the lack of healthcare access for women. Can you tell us about your vision for improving women's healthcare across the state?
Yes. So I'm a woman, I'm 27, woman of color, and I envision myself having children one day. That would be awesome. But I don't want to have children in Texas because of the decisions that are coming down year after year after year, especially after the horrendous tragedy of Kate Cox up here in North Texas. Women and individuals who want to have children are now forced to have to ask themselves, is Texas where I want to raise a family? Is Texas safe for me to be pregnant? And never have I ever wanted to be in a circumstance where I have to balance my want to have children and a family with the fact that I could be forced to flee a state to get an abortion when needed. When I was young, around 19, I started organizing for Planned Parenthood, and I worked alongside with them, walking, lobbying, helping write policy, even writing out sexual education curriculum as an honors thesis in college. And what I learned very quickly is that individuals who are seeking abortion, it comes from a state of love, actually. A lot of people think of abortion as, no, we hate children. No, we hate family planning. And when I think of women's healthcare, women's reproductive justice, women's reproductive rights, it's the fact that we love our future family so much, or we love our current children we have, or we love the lifestyle and careers we have for ourselves. And that's why we choose. It's not because we have this disdain or disappointment or hatred towards anything. It's because we love our community so much, we are actually taking into account if this child is going to have the financial support and love and inclusion when it is born into this world. So whenever I think of women's reproductive health care and the state of it here in Texas and how we're going to flip so many of our seats running on this issue, is to frame our conversations with Republicans or conservatives who might think of abortion as this terrible, horrendous act, when really it's about loving our community so much that we're thinking so ahead into the future, taking into account the livelihood of other people not yet born. And that's why a lot of us women and individuals who want a family plan are choosing to have an abortion. And as I run for office, I'm reminded of some recent races. 2 women, one in Alabama and one in Florida, solely running on women's reproductive justice, flipped their districts from red to blue in special runoffs. It is possible We can do it in Texas. It takes a certain individual like ourselves on this panel who can have hard conversations with people, reframing issues in a way that doesn't isolate people, but brings them together and finds middle ground around the idea that choice is about appreciating and loving our communities.
Yeah, I completely understand and completely agree with you. I want to bring it over to Christian. You're an advocate for working families, and as big corporations, utility companies, and health insurance companies continue to raise their prices, Texas women still face one of the highest wage gaps in the country. How do you plan to address these hurdles in the Texas House?
Yeah, and right now Texas women make 71 cents to a man's dollar, and it's even lower for women of color here in the state. Latinas, for example, we make 57 cents to a dollar, and a majority of people that live in House District 118 are Latino, are working class, right? And we know that the disparity in the gender pay gap is more prevalent in the blue collar communities. So, it's definitely something that, we're always thinking about and talking about in District 118. And it's so important that we're supporting women and making sure that we're getting people into office that are going to fight for equal rights and compensation. To start, in Texas, we have to, raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour and increase worker protections, which my opponent has consistently voted against. We also need to make sure that we're giving local municipalities the power to set their own laws around parental leave, paid sick leave. These are issues that touch women so intimately, and we got to make sure that we're giving the power to our municipalities to be able to do that. And finally, we got to make sure that we're doing key steps like expanding Medicaid. If we expand Medicaid, that's the single biggest thing that we can do right now in Texas to increase access to healthcare that is both quality and affordable. Right. So it's making sure that we're doing all these things that are going to help fix the bottom line for folks, and also help making sure that we're increasing quality of life for women here in Texas. It's not lost on anyone that 70% of the seats that are filled in the Texas legislature are filled by men. Right. And so when we talk about policies that are addressing the gender pay gap, those are not the policies that are being prioritized. That's why it's so important that we're getting more female representation in the state ledge. And it is so crazy to say that in the year 2024, if successful, I would be the first woman elected to House District 118. That's just so crazy to say. I became the first woman nominee of any party just this past month. And that's why I'm working so hard, because I know how critical it is that we have women from working class backgrounds in these seats that understand the realities of issues like gender pay gap, and are ready to close it. And so that's why I'm out here working super hard.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. And speaking of diversity, I'm going to pass it back to Avery. Avery, Texas is one of the most diverse states in the union, but Texas Republicans continue to ban inclusionary practices like DEI program funding in public higher education. Can you tell us the importance of embracing our rich diversity at a time when it's under attack?
There's never a reason not to embrace DE&I. It is the most beneficial thing that, say, businesses, families, schools, churches can experience. And when I was serving as Miss Texas, being the first Asian American to win in the 100-year history of Miss America, my social platform was called Y'all Means All, putting the all back in y'all. And I traveled 70,000 miles teaching in over 200 public schools in more than 180,000 school-aged children the importance of treating their Texas neighbor as they would treat themselves. And I know that representatives in the Capitol just can't wrap their head around this idea of being inclusive and respectful to one another. And the way that I got around this loophole by teaching DE&I in public schools was by publishing a children's book that taught the importance of DE&I through an analogy of growing a garden. And I'd love to leave it with y'all so that you can take it with you and teach others, whether that be someone who's 5 or 55, an acronym, how to treat others the same way you want to be treated. So when I was in law school, I experienced incredible challenges as a woman of color. Minorities experience substantial challenges that are both within our own minds or systems in place created by people to keep us in the positions that we're in. And during law school, I thought about dropping out. I got bad grades, I had terrible mental health, and the pandemic was happening. That was a combination for disaster. So, what does one do when that happens? Well, you start a garden. I got a green thumb and decided to try a new hobby. And through my endeavors, I grew a giant green bell pepper the size of my face that I named Big Daddy. And you're probably thinking, where is this going? I'll wrap this up. I grew this giant green bell pepper, and it made me realize that a lot of people don't understand the idea of DE&I because they don't know how to grow and they don't want other people to grow. And through my children's book, I teach children and anyone, regardless of their age, really, to give kindness to each other and to yourself, to be respectful of people and their backgrounds, to offer your ears to listen, and to not enter conversations with the intention of changing people's minds and welcoming people's differences. And that's spelled GROW, grow. And, I think our representatives in the Capitol could learn a thing or two if they understood what the acronym GROW meant. Because DE&I, for me, changed my life. My DE&I college program at SMU convinced me not to drop out of school. I was the first in my family to graduate college, the first in my family to graduate law school. And there are departments equipped to support students who are severely disenfranchised by the system. It's not the fact that we are receiving special treatment. We are being provided enough treatment to be equitable with our colleagues and students. So that's what I would say on DE&I. As far as legislation, when elected, I'd actively vote against and propose bills that protected curriculum, historically accurate curriculum, and also provided departments safety and protection who wanted to start back up their DE&I programs. At the end of the day, Texas is bigger and better. And there's enough space for all of us to thrive. We just have to let go of our egos and allow people to grow in the way that they aspire to one day.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful message. Thank you so much, Avery. I want to pass it to Judge Weems. How has your experience as the sitting judge for the Harris County Civil District Court, prepared you for the Supreme Court bench?
Well, my experience, it's more than just being on the bench. I'm about to start my 6th year on the bench. To cap on the same idea about the importance of diversity and inclusion, I'm the first Vietnamese American on the bench in Harris County, period, which is surprising when you really think about the fact that Harris County is the second largest Vietnamese population in the country. And it has taken all the way up into 2018, the year I was elected, for the first time for a Vietnamese attorney to become a judge in Harris County. I was a practicing lawyer for 18 years, a trial lawyer. I was in courtrooms. I mentioned before, I'm a proud member of the American Board of Trial Advocates. It's an honorary organization for trial lawyers where you have to have tried enough cases. You have to be nominated by your peers and you are voted on, and they vet you. They called everybody I tried a case against to make sure that I was not a jerk before they agreed to accept me into that organization. And I'm hugely proud of that. I'm double board certified. I'm board certified in personal injury trial law and civil trial law. Before I took the bench and on the bench, I've tried a huge number of cases. Before I got on the bench, I tried cases that went up to the Texas Supreme Court. I mean, so I understand it is more than just, oh, I was a trial lawyer and now I'm a judge. And so that should naturally make me a fit for a higher court. Really, what makes me a good fit for the Texas Supreme Court is by trying real cases involving real people, having clients. I understand the pragmatic result of what happens with some of the rulings that the Texas Supreme Court hands down, right? We are supposed to look at each case individually and the facts of that case. But sometimes you also have to look at, all right, the law that we are making in making this decision is going to impact how cases are tried in the future. And what does that mean? How does that pragmatically affect litigants all the way down in JP court, county court, district court? and all the civil courts, what does it mean for them? And I think you have to have had that kind of trial experience, you have to have had that kind of interaction with clients to really understand it. Before I took the bench, I was a plaintiff's personal injury lawyer. I represented people predominantly. And there's nobody currently on the Texas Supreme Court who can say that. They all come from corporations. Several of them were judges before taking the bench, just like I was. But yeah, there's a difference between being an elected judge and actually having been in the courtroom, on the field, in the fight on behalf of an individual who cannot speak for themselves. And to be clear, the Texas Supreme Court, it is just the civil. I mean, that's all it is. There are 2 lanes when you go up to the highest courts. We have 2. Part of the transparency, everybody needs to know, because I get asked a lot of criminal questions, or what would I do in a criminal situation? And that is not the lane the Texas Supreme Court lives in. The Court of Criminal Appeals, of which there are 3 very, very qualified women who are running for the 3 benches on the Court of Criminal Appeals, are the ones that is the high court for all criminal appeals in the state of Texas. And just gonna say, I can't really, because I'm a judge, I can't endorse anybody, but I'm going to encourage that everybody on this call should look at all of the races, all the judicial races statewide. Educate yourself. It is literally only 3 races on the Texas Supreme Court and 3 races on the Court of Criminal Appeals. So 6 races statewide, because everybody's vote is going to matter. And I'm going to beg everybody who's listening to this call to take a little bit of time and please make an informed choice, because those judges are going to ultimately make a difference in a lot of people's lives. And if you don't take the time to just educate yourself, then you run the risk of making a vote that is going to negatively impact you more than you think.
Yeah. Thank you for also shouting out the Court of Criminal Appeals. That is a very, very, very important race that I don't think a lot of people know about or understand. For my last question of the night, I'm going to bring it to Member Perez Diaz. What would you say to any woman that's considering running for office?
Do it. It's very, very easy. Don't be afraid. I think oftentimes women are, we're powerful. We have a lot of strength. We have emotional maturity and intelligence and resilience in a way that I think ensures that when we make decisions, we're thinking about everybody around us, right? We're not just thinking about ourselves. And so I think it was Christian who earlier said, that 70% of people in elected office right now are male. That is insane. That is insane, right? Can you imagine if we had more women serving in public office, more people that think about and center the holistic community, right? That center the idea of lifting each other up so that we all rise. That is what women do. That is the power of our collective spirits. Our ancestors have taught us that women carry the world, right? That is my perspective, right? I think that, especially when it comes to making decisions, I mean, we've sort of been touching on all these issues around healthcare and pay disparities, right? And even understanding how in sexual health, right, our young girls aren't getting the curriculum, right, aren't getting the lessons that they need to protect themselves and to make responsible decisions, because you don't have policymakers in place that understand that, right, or understand the importance of it. Women need to be at the table. And if we're not there yet, tear the doors down and get there, right? Because we belong there, right? And oftentimes as well, like I know, and I personally experienced it, right? You have that imposter syndrome. Do I belong here? Is this a space? And hell yes, you do, right? You work just as hard, right? You knocked on just as many doors. You sweat just as much, to talk to constituents, to learn what it is to be a good representative. That is the care, the passion, the love that we come to this work with. we just need to encourage more of our sisters to do it and then support each other when we're in the thick of it. And when we do that, I mean, a rising tide raises all. So
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom. Now I'm going to move on to the Q&A. So does anyone have questions for our panel? Okay. From Jenna. Christian, you have a stellar block walking team. Can you tell us about how talking with voters in your community motivates you?
Yeah, my background as an organizer, I think, has really given me the experience that I need to be able to be an effective candidate. I've spent my whole career, being able to not just like talk to people at the door, but really listen to them. Right. And so I think like that's how we build relationships with people, and that's how we get really connected with them. So I've had a really, amazing time getting to, go knock door to door in my community and build a really amazing field team. So, and we're still knocking doors, like I said, and we know that in this district, that's how we win, right? It's going door to door and having conversations and just meeting people where they are, but not leaving them there. So I take so many stories with me, and I think about them, and it's really helping me become a better candidate, because you learn so much when you talk to people at the doors, right? Because you might have in your head how you think about issues, but then you talk to people who are dealing with them day to day, and it really just, helps you think about them in a new perspective. So, we have to knock doors, and we have to do it really early. So if you're looking for, any volunteer opportunities in the San Antonio area, please go to our website. It's just christianfortexas.com, Christian with the K. We have volunteer opportunities every single weekend from now until November 6th.
That's great. I have one for you, Avery, from Brenda. You are one of the youngest women running for office in Texas right now. What advice do you have for young women just now getting involved in politics?
Yes, if my history is right, I believe I'd be the youngest ever elected first Gen Z in the state legislature, the state house specifically. And two major pieces of advice if you are flirting with the idea of running for office. Number one, as a woman, and specifically women of color, we struggle to ask for help. So I like to use the term wishing out loud, to always speak out what you want, what you need, and ask, whether that be your friends and family, your teachers, your colleagues, the people you volunteer alongside with. Hey, I'm thinking about running for office. Would you ever be interested in volunteering with me? Hey, I feel very led to run for school board. Do you think that you could help me review some policies over coffee one weekend? Hey, I really need help raising money. Can you tell me how to ask for money? And also not being afraid to also cold connect with people online, whether that be LinkedIn. I know LinkedIn is kind of antiquated for some people. It's like a dinosaur, but I've made incredible connections that have helped my campaign through cold messaging on LinkedIn and expanding my relationships there, and also cold messaging on social media, asking people for help or for collaboration opportunities. And then finally, the second piece of advice I have for young women thinking about running for office is politics is scary, and it's very expensive, and it's very intimidating, and it's very hard. I'm not here to tell you that it's going to be easy. In fact, I'm sure the women on this panel right now probably question what on earth are we doing here? But you just got to fake it till you make it. The people in office, honestly, half the time probably don't know what they're talking about. Probably didn't read a bill completely, if we're going to be honest. And some of these, not to say, but men have a very great way of faking it till they make it. They're so bold and courageous, and they speak directly. And it's time for us to take up space in our own ways. So those are the two pieces of advice I would give to young women who are thinking about running for office.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a question for Member Perez Diaz. Many teachers are concerned about the state of public education, but are so terrified to speak up. What advice do you have for us to get them to come out?
Oh my gosh. Mentorship. I truly believe in mentorship. And one of the most important things, and this is what I've been saying since, I think for the last couple of legislative sessions, it's just been, there's always an attack on public education. But more specifically, I think in the last two legislative sessions, there's been an attack on educators, right? And specifically educators. And so what I've said is, find tenured educators who understand how to navigate the gray spaces. There is a lot of black and white. People are afraid of the law. What do I say? What can I not say? Is this too civic education focused? Like, can I those sorts of conversations didn't exist several years ago. You've taken the love of learning and teaching out of the career. And so that you see so many young, excited educators coming into this profession where it's very questionable about what you can and can't do. Find those educators who've been in the work for a very long time, who understand how to, maneuver and navigate through the gray, and get the things done, right? Still find the purpose and the passion and the love for it. Find community. There are a lot of great organizations out there that are doing just that. Here in San Antonio, there's San Antonio Leaders and Teachers, SALT. It's a nonprofit organization that specifically was created to just establish community. It is networking for educators who are in the classroom every day. They're hustling and they just need somebody who understands them and understands the struggle. Building that and creating that sort of community, I think, helps to engage educators in a different way. And when you find community, you find voice. You recognize that you have power, right? I think about the numbers of educators across the state. Majority are female. That's not just in the state, right? 80% of the population careered in education are female, right? Can you imagine if more educators voted? Like that would change the politics of not just this state, but this country, right? You'll find your voice when you find community. So find those mentors, those people that can help shepherd you through. And then mentors, learn from your mentees, because I'm sitting here and listening to Avery speak and I'm like invigorated all over again. I remember being 27 years old and running for public office, right? And, it's just an honor to really be sitting on this panel with you all, right? But I think find community and learn, mentor to mentee and mentee to mentor.
Yeah. I have a question for Judge Weems. Do you have any suggestions for volunteers about how they can talk to everyday voters about your race and other judicial races so we can raise the profile of those races?
The easiest way to talk about the Texas Supreme Court is just reminding people every single time that our Supreme Court does something that is that makes a lot of people unhappy, which is more often than we probably want to have happen. Remind them that 3 of those 9 justices are up for election this cycle in November, and that it matters. And so that every single time they do something that provokes ire, that there is a way we can do something about it. I mean, the surprising thing is for me, when Kate Cox was happening in December, it was literally at the time that I was going to Austin to file. And suddenly I was getting donations from people all across the country. And people were reaching out on my website to like, what can I do to help? I don't live in Texas, but I want to make calls. Or I don't live in Texas, but I'll write postcards for you. And it took me a second to realize this, like, oh my God, why are all these random people reaching out to me? It's because people are, not just Texans, people all over this country are mad about what our Supreme Court is doing. And so instead of it's not like the US Supreme Court. And I think that is the thing that most people really, really need to remember. It is not an appointment for life. Governor Abbott did not decide, or Governor Perry, or any one of our governors since Governor Richards did not make a decision and go, this is who's going to sit on the Supreme Court. Every cycle, whether it's a gubernatorial cycle or presidential cycle, there are 3 Texas Supreme Court justices and 10 justices on the Court of Criminal Appeals that are on ballot, right? And then I have people tell me all the time, it's like, well, that's just 3 votes, right? Let's say everybody gets saw, and that's 3 votes. That doesn't change anything. It does, because now you have another voice at the table. And if we can finally get somebody into one of these courts and we win a statewide race, which, like we said from the beginning, has not happened in 30 years. Avery has never had a statewide politician in Texas that was a Democrat in her entire life, right? How shocking and crazy is that? But we can't say, well, it's a fruitless endeavor, or it's only 3 seats, so it doesn't change anything. This is how it starts. And it starts by making sure that people understand and realize that this is not like the US Supreme Court. We don't have to live with the people that are in our Texas Supreme Court and in our Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, right? The voters in Texas are the ones who are going to decide who is going to interpret the laws. So every single time, and I point this out because there is another abortion case that is going to drop probably sometime in June, probably right before the 2nd anniversary of the Dobbs opinion. It was heard in November. It's different than the Kate Cox case, because in this case, literally what happened is this is after the fact. Kate Cox was like a woman who was pregnant and then was concerned and wanted to have the ability to have an abortion. The case that was heard by the Texas Supreme Court in November is about several women after the fact, after they were already denied that right, and what happened to them. And that opinion is going to drop this, I anticipate, either late May or early June. And what we can all do is, I can only imagine that the opinion that the Supreme Court is going to come out with is not going to excite anybody on this call. But we can make sure that everybody knows about it, that the people who decided it, 1/3 of them can be voted out in November. And if we disagree with that opinion, and if we disagree with a lot of the decisions that our Texas Supreme Court is making, then we have a responsibility to vote 1/3 of them out in November.
Yeah. Well, I just thank you so much for your words. And I want to thank all of you so much for taking the time out of your campaign trail to come speak with us on the issues that are facing Texas women this cycle. It's clear that you are all rock stars, and we can't wait to support you for the remainder of the cycle. Now, I have one final question. Who's ready for the Beyonce album tonight? Let's go. All right. Well, thank you so much for everyone who joined and watched along with us. And thank you again for our lovely panel. Bye, everyone.